Today we present a panel addressing housing, more specifically about the failures of for-profit housing to more than half of the population who rent. Here is Tamara Herman.
So I guess the theme of this overall conference is if capitalism doesn't work, what does? And what Tristan had asked me to speak specifically about is how the market fails people's housing needs in the downtown east side and what alternatives exist. And I'm also going to be talking a bit about what's happening now, because I know that there's many of you in this room who follow things pretty closely, and it's a pretty critical time right now in terms of housing in the downtown east side. And so as Tristan said at the beginning, I work with King Mong over here at the Carnegie Community Action Project. And we are a project of the Carnegie Community Center's board. And we do a lot of research and community organizing around housing and income. And Harold is also a volunteer and probably has just as much as me to say on this, if not much, much more as well. So I guess you could say that nowhere is the failure of capitalism clearer than it is in the downtown east side when it comes to housing. As many of you know, there's 5,000 people who are living in the worst housing in urban Canada, and over 750 are homeless. And welfare rates have not been raised since 2007, so they're at $610 a month right now. And we've been watching at CCAP the price of private single-room occupancy hotels, which are kind of the last stop before homelessness, escalate since the Woodwards building came up. So it's a crisis of displacement in the downtown east side, and the proof that displacement is occurring is the rising price of rental rates in the area. So what's going on here? I guess you could say, or some would argue, that the invisible hand of the capitalist market is supposed to take care of people's housing needs, and obviously the invisible hand is just completely sweeping people right out of the neighborhood. The market allows real estate to rise based on a speculative market. Capital is concentrated, prices go up. People who are poor, and it tends to be quite racialized as well, can no longer afford to live in an area. That's basically gentrification, and that's something that's visible, as you're riding your bike or taking the bus or walking across Hastings Street. It's plain to see. There's this argument, I think, that we hear all the time that gentrification is just the natural way that urban development is supposed to go. It just happens. It's kind of like the modern version of manifest destiny, which is this colonial term that, the West is supposed to be taken over by white people. Well, gentrification is the natural way that cities go. But what I want to argue is that there's nothing that's inevitable or natural or uncontrollable about gentrification. And instead, if we look at the downtown east side, it's a set of concerted policies put in place by the Vision Party and those that came before as well that zone for gentrification and that provides subsidies and different development incentives. And so I'm not going to go into the whole boring world of planning too much, but just to give a few examples, right now you'll see if you go through the City of Vancouver website, there's a lot of documents on the revitalization of the downtown east side. If you look through them, what those documents are is there are different subsidies and incentives given to developers to transform the area. And so one example is the Heritage Renovation Subsidy Program. How many of you are familiar with the Burns Block story? Okay, a few people, but there's this bar if you walk down the street called Bitters, and it looks really hipster and funky. It used to be an SRO. Most of the inhabitants were Indigenous women. It's hard to get rid of tenants legally, and so the owner called the fire department basically on himself to say that there were fire code violations. The residents were pushed out. The building was deemed unsafe. The city gave the owner $3.3 million to revitalize the building, and now it's renting what it calls micro lofts at $750 a month on Craigslist and has a fancy bar underneath. So this is the type, these types of examples are what drives gentrification forward. There's also zoning policies, and those control density and types of residences, and those are also common devices for driving gentrification, or, Vision would say revitalization forward. So if gentrification is natural, there must be some alternatives to it, right? Because it's fabricated, and there are. And so CCAP, many years ago, before I was here, did this visioning process where it talked to hundreds of residents of the downtown east side about what they would like to see instead. And I'm not going to go over all of it, but just housing related, the obvious no-brainer solution to the problem of housing in the downtown east side is to create more social housing that's available to people at welfare and pension rates. And so what does that take? That takes zoning for social housing. So that would take a zoning rule that says there are no condos or strata in the downtown east side until 5,000 SROs are replaced and the 750 to 850 people who are homeless are housed. And it takes capital, state capital, because the market is not going to do that itself, to buy buildings and to designate land for social housing. So those are the types of demands that we have. What the city says is that it doesn't have any money to buy social housing, so there has to be a market solution to the housing crisis. And they also, they have an interest in trying to control and contain the housing crisis as well, right? Otherwise, they'd have more wood spots popping up all over the place. So what they use mostly is this thing called community amenity contributions, which basically a developer gets to build a building that has more stories or more density, so more possibility to make money in exchange for making a few social housing units. And King Mong and I did a calculation based on this condo coming up at the corner of Main and Kiefer, which has 22 units of social housing and 156 strata units. And so we thought, okay, well, if we use that ratio and we try and build the 5,850 units we need, then we'd have to build 173,000 condos in the downtown east side to house everyone. So obviously that market solution isn't working. So I know time is tight, 3 minutes. Okay, just really quickly, what's happening now is that the city has put in place this local area planning process with a low-income caucus, or with low-income representatives to plan the development future of the downtown east side. And in response, the low-income caucus came up with its own plan, which is called the Social Justice Zone for the downtown east side. And that's on our website. You can look at it. We have 3,000 signatures of people in the downtown east side who support this plan. When the draft plan actually came out, we were really surprised because there was a mechanism in it for 60% social housing zoning and 40% market rentals that would effectively block condos in the sub-district of the downtown east side. What's happening now is that the business improvement associations are irate, residents associations are furious, they're organizing relentlessly against us. They're writing letters to council, and they're trying to get this overturned. They've said that low-income people have too much voice in the process, and that we have a narrow political philosophy, which is that we want housing, I guess, because that's all we're saying, really. And that, and there are a few service agencies as well who believe that the community amenity contribution model I told you guys about, the one that would take 173,000 condo units to house people, is the only way forward, and this would block that, right? So they say there'll be no social housing built because condos won't be allowed. So what we're doing is organizing to try and get this somewhat flawed mechanism through, because we think that's the only good thing that's going to come out of this process, really. And if you are interested in supporting us in our work, please connect with us online or on Facebook. I can't believe I'm making a Facebook pitch, but we really do need to show vision that, we do have the support of the wider community for a type of plan that would actually house people in the downtown east side. So thank you.